let's jump straight into the questions that we've been getting. And first of all, just from kind of putting all these down, appreciate Devram Otsmar. Ton of questions. So I really appreciate you providing a lot of stuff for us. So let's start off with one of yours first. The one I saw first was, can you share your plans to improve extensibility of WebFocus to incorporate more Python and R into analysis? So I think that was shown a little bit in the demo, but I think that's probably something Dithya, you or Renee could probably talk to more in more detail.
Yeah, sure, I can take that. Renee, feel free to add, as we go along. But in terms of incorporating Python R into our product stack, we have two products right now that use Python and R at the back end. We got the data science adapter, which maps into a Python compiler and an R compiler. And within that Python compiler, essentially, it is a sandbox environment in your computer. You can install any kind of libraries that exist in Python and make it work within the data science adapter. So there is no, pick and choose library kind of thing. Same thing holds true for R. And the second thing is the self-service capability and the model choices that we're embedding into the self-service capability is propelled by Python and R language, which will enable you to kind of scale your model and kind of partially fit that or fine tune that as your data grows. I hope that answers the question.
Absolutely. And if you guys have any follow-up questions, let us know. Or like I said, just reach out to us. We're more than glad to have a further conversation. So a question from Dantal Minimo. How can AI and machine learning benefit a state's education system with student accountability, standardized testing? That's kind of a use case question. I don't know if we have anybody specific on our team that has education background that's at least on the call, but does anybody wants to kind of talk about their thoughts on that?
I can take that one, Tim. Dinesh here. So I think excellent question. I think the use cases that we've worked with inside of the K through 12 and college education systems have been more along predicting churn, predicting student retention, things like that. But we had one discussion with the Pennsylvania Education Board on going away from the snapshot type examination system and moving more towards an individualized path through AI. So the discussions were around understanding the models that gave us more insights into an individual student's learning ability, predicting their scores based on how they have kind of tackled their courses along the way. And then moved along into what can we kind of suggest as learning tools, as learning courses for these individualized students. So that way the learning programs are not so much standardized. They want to move away from cram. Let's cram all the content together. Let's pass the exam and then forget all about it. Then move really into pure learning. So that's an excellent question. Thank you for that.
Tim, if you can, I can add to that as well. I worked on a use case in the educational sector. I don't know if it was Michigan or Florida. This is about a year ago where we wanted to predict, essentially it was more campaign management. They wanted to predict which alumni to target for getting donations up for the revenue generation of the organization. And so that was about a year ago, and the products that we mapped into that was both the data science adapter as well as the self-service capability. It's a broader organization that had that retention strategy in place as well. So that was done through our partner channel that essentially built that AI model for the customer and using the data science adapter, and that was embedded within the WebFocus platform in a dashboard that is updated regularly. So that's I just want to kind of attach that use case here.
Perfect. I appreciate that. Moving on to the next one. Another one from Devram. So can you share plans to incorporate natural language processing analysis or any qualitative data analysis in WebFocus? Probably another question for you.
I can take that as well. Yeah, so natural language process, there are two ways we can do that. I'm going to tackle the first one, which is something we already showed, which is to kind of leverage the data science adapter. Like I said, you're open to using any kind of library within the Python version that you have, and that includes the natural language processing, which is NLTK and a few others. But in addition to that, kind of moving away from curation to operationalization, we are embedding natural language processing and, more importantly, natural language query into our products, and you're going to see elements of that being released to the field in the near future.
Perfect. Very good. So another one, and there were a few of these on the integration of R and Python, so I'm trying to kind of pull some of these together. But one from Glencoe, from Kitsap, I believe. We are using a WebFocus hosted environment hosted in the cloud. Can we integrate R and Python that is running in our local environment, or do we depend on versions of tool installed on the hosted version? I think we kind of talked about this a little bit, Aditya, in one of your questions earlier. I'll let you kind of expound on that if you want to, any.
Yeah, I just want to make sure I captured the question correctly. Was the question around versioning of R and Python? Was that right?
No, it was more about if so I believe that Glencoe is with Kitsap Credit Union, and they are currently hosted in the cloud, a WebFocus environment in the cloud. So I think the question stems around if they need anything from a license standpoint, or software standpoint outside of that. The specific question says, can we integrate R and Python that is running in our local environment? So actually, now that I read that, I think they have R and Python already running in their local environment, and how can they connect to that?
Yeah, certainly. So you can do that. In fact, that's the way we have to kind of design the data science adapter. So in theory, you can build your AI model in any system you want, and then once you have that model trained, you essentially have a model that you're trying to pick insights from, right? So that model, once you train it, needs to be then placed at the WebFocus server end for you to kind of piggyback from the data science adapter. So where you do the training of that model, it doesn't really matter. You can do it on the cloud, you can do it on-prem. And once you train that model, to kind of integrate that within the data science adapter, you need to recite that what the WebFocus platform is for you to tap into that model and then build visualizations from it. But if the question is broader than that from a licensing perspective, then perhaps you can take that offline.
Yeah, completely agree. Perfect. This is one we actually had put on the list that we got by email before. I think we got a few of these other than ones that we've already asked. Rob Fosnall, I believe from Brotherhood Mutual, his question was, stepping back from technology, how do we separate hype and excitement for AI ML from reality? I like this question. I tend to be reminded from a quote from Einstein, that everything that can be counted counts, and that everything that can count can be counted. Just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. How can we effectively identify or disqualify products that we in the business dream up? And I know Aditya, you and Zach probably, and Nash all probably have some insights on that, and Renee as well. Zach, do you want to take? Are you?
Yeah, I'd love to take that. I mean, this is a huge question, but it's probably one of the more important ones you can ask, right? I think Aditya has done a good job of talking about the fact that really in the space of digital transformation, you need to start with data curation and starting to take inventory of what you got, what you've got to work with. That's very important. I think the second point I would say is that while AI is currently an area of active research, many of the things we can do in commercial applications don't require robust research teams. Not everything is a science project. You saw demonstrated today a number of capabilities that will work out of the box. So, and I think I go also back to the guidance that Aditya provided. If you've got data and it's well managed, which I understand not everybody is in that position, but that getting that house in order is an important first step. If you find yourself in that position and understand that you are working toward furthering a particular business goal and not just trying to integrate AI simply because it's cool, because it's a buzzword, right? It's actually furthering the business. Then the next step is to say, what tools available today can already solve our problem, right? And to keep in mind that while there are ways of de-risking AI applications, simply because, as I kind of jokingly referred to at the beginning, there's a lot of stuff it's technically AI, but is not at the peak of the hype cycle now, but can still deliver tremendous value.
Awesome. Yeah, I agree. And I think that's a great question. Is some of these guys, and it was one of our other questions as well, is some of these guys start off on their journey. How are they able to get through all the hype to what really can make a true difference in what they're doing right now, which is what all of us are worried about. So I'm going to take a few of these. I'm kind of looking through. I want to make sure that I think we maybe have answered some of these, maybe in the demo or some other things, but I want to make sure. One of these talks asks about, can you show us the examples of how WebFocus handles real-time streaming data adapters for AI applications? I think that's something we may have shown, Renee, in the actual demo that was from Victor Fonseca.
Yeah.
But if you wanted to expound on that, I'll definitely give you the chance.
Sure. So we can also connect Kafka adapter for real-time streaming of data coming into WebFocus. And that is, used pretty easily. So it really just depends on where your data is, how you want to connect with it, but we're happy to sit and talk with you to be able to use that. So the two is kind of linked, but also somewhat separate. Real-time data coming in tends to come through adapters like Kafka, and then it doesn't matter to WebFocus, how you want to present that, or you want to run that through a data science model at the same time. Perfect.
And one other one, Renee, that I think, again, I'll let you kind of expound on if you want to, but make sure I found it here. Are there any limitations to the type of Python R libraries available via the data science adapter? Something that may show a little bit of.
I don't think so, because you just deploy any of the dependencies just like you would when you deploy it on any other platform, correct, Aditya? So I don't think that there's any limitations on libraries.
Yeah, so the only limitation that we have is compliance with the Python versioning that we support, and I think that is 3.6 star. Maybe we can kind of reconnect on that. But once we have that versioning set up, then all the libraries underneath that versioning is supported, which means that you can really build a model using any of those techniques.
Perfect. Yeah. And we still have a few more questions, guys. I just looking at the time, and we are at 4:30 Eastern, which is the official end of this. But we will stick around and answer some of the rest of these. There's not a whole lot more, but I want to make sure we get a chance to go through some of these. So appreciate everybody who jumped on it, who has to leave. And again, congratulations to the ones who won the gift card. If you guys want to have a follow-up call with us, again, reach out. We'll be reaching out to everybody who's on this as well. So, feel free to let us know how we can help in the future. But appreciate everybody joining. With that said, I want to move on quickly. Can you please talk about, this was from David Piniafora. Can you please talk about exponential smoothing prediction capabilities? Zach, this may be one that I don't know if you have experience in, or if someone else on the team has.
I could take that. Yeah, so exponential smoothing, I'm assuming David means forecasting using exponential smoothing. In a nutshell, yeah, we can do that. There are a couple of ways you can do that. First is you can use a data science adapter to do that. Second is we have elements of forecasting and temporal predictions that's going to be embedded within the self-service capabilities. Mind you, the self-service capability we just released, it has a scheme of learning techniques, but we are building that up even more by gathering field requirements, and forecasting is one of those core things. ARIMA is something I can talk about as well. That's going to be part of it. And the third way is, going back to the automated insights piece that Renee had demonstrated under the tab of time-based, that has elements of exponential smoothing as well as time series prediction embedded in that to capture that. And that's a great way of kind of capturing seasonality as well as detecting outliers within your time series trends.
Yeah, just to add to that, Aditya. So, we've had some use cases where we've worked with geometrically increasing smoothing and geometrically decreasing smoothing depending on what kinds of time series you want. If you wanted to forget a certain time period in your time series, or you want to assign a weightage to years in the past, or you want to assign a weightage to upcoming years, and you want to build a predictive model out of that. So we've worked with all of those use cases, and WebFocus lends itself really well to exponential smoothing.
Perfect. Perfect. I'm looking at a couple of these from Devrim that may kind of be connected. So I'll go ahead and ask both at the same time, and feel free. I think this probably, Aditya, is probably another one from you or Renee from just a product standpoint. But one of these from Devrim says, while AI and ML requires huge data sets to create neural network analysis to make predictions based on data, how are we planning to provide data security that our data does not become part of the big data for improved predictions for other clients? The other one, it's kind of similar to that I thought we may lump with that one. It talks about data governance. Now I'm trying to find it. Let's go ahead and take that one, and I'll find the other one. We're doing it.
Sure. Yeah. So let me take that. That's a bit of a broad question, and if I kind of understand the foundation of that question, it's around data privacy and how do we essentially, once you train a model, how do you not invoke it? How do you invoke it correctly, right? Residency of that model, as well as exposing data within that model that could be that could be subject to ethical violations and stuff like that. To answer your question in a security perspective, our products, so, if you take a look at the data science adapter, it's really going back to the way we architected it. You can build that in any computer, whether on cloud or on-prem. So you kind of govern the maintenance around that model, right? You kind of govern that life cycle around that model. Currently, we don't have a collaborative way to kind of average multiple models together, which kind of makes it an AI model lake, if you will. We don't have that capability yet, but I think when we get to that stage is when questions like that would be more relevant, which is how do you not expose private data for a particular organization to another organization, for instance.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other one, which I did find again, I'm sorry, it is related to that a little bit, I think, but not entirely. So do you have plans to ensure AI ML will still be functional with less structured, governed data ecosystems? I like the fuzzy logic and phonetical groupings in the WebFocus to overcome some issues with less clean data. So maybe some connection there, but not completely.
Yeah, so I think, so to answer your question, there are certain use cases that we have tackled that leverages AI to enhance data management or to enhance, data quality, right? We have done that against a few manufacturing organizations. I've done that about a couple of years ago, where, we had multiple vendors sending bill of materials to one organization, and, they all had different ways of describing the same kind of material. So we needed AI to be embedded over there to kind of understand the variation and map it to one common term, right? And so you can use AI to do that. And like I said before, for us, AI is more of a horizontal approach, which means that you're going to see elements of that being built into data management and data quality portfolio. And, fuzzy logic, as well as a few other techniques that isolation forest and others that kind of capture anomalies, we're certainly embedding that to make it much more user-friendly from an operationalization perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate that, Aditya, again. And Renee, I think one that probably kind of a question from your part was, our insight visualization customizable like access and legend labels or titles? I think they're asking, once you create your charts from the visual insights, or is all that stuff customizable? And I would think the answer is yes, but I'd rather it come from you.
Yeah, I actually was trying to figure that out while we were going into Q&A, but I haven't gone and looked yet. So I will try and find the answer on that. I think so, but again, I don't know.
Sorry to interrupt, but I would, so we've had multiple implementations where we've actually customized that. The only point I'd like to make is that you have to look at automated insights as really offline analytics, as going, and then looking at your your dimensions and your facts, and you're building automated insights, but it's really for yourself at that point when you're in the act of building it. So you have a lot of customizability at that point. But then when you're now publishing to the rest of the organization, then now it becomes kind of a common visual application. But the answer to your question is yes, there's a lot of customizability around that.
Okay, moving on. So Colton Zier, there's a question from him. When creating a correlation, is it using the correlation from a linear regression analysis? If so, does it use stepwise progression to attempt to find the best model or the additive model?
Yeah, so there are different techniques that we use to do that. I can't really speak of that techniques at this point in time, but we're using different techniques, and the combination of metrics that we use to identify the correlation between different variables. We got to capture different verticals as well to understand what correlation is. So it's a bit of a heavier engine that's in the back end to identify correlation, as well as what you'll see in the long-term causation.
Absolutely. Perfect. And another question, I think this was two questions, but they are kind of tied into one. Lulu Asoba, in computing, how do you apply data as a service in AI and ML, and what are the benefits to data as a service? You might want to take a shot at that.
I can take a shot at that. So I mean, when you're saying data as a service in ML, I don't really know what that means. But I think if I talk about AI as a service, what we are talking about is more model ops as a service, right? So yeah. That's an important element in what we're trying to drive here. There's a few ways of doing that. Without getting into too much detail, in terms of positioning it, we got model ops that generally in the field, or generally within the product space, you have model ops platforms that enable data scientists to create models and deploy models, and we have tools to essentially work with you to help you productize these models, to govern those models, and to monitor the maturity of these models. There are new elements of model ops that are coming out that's a bit more verticalized focused, and that kind of answers very niche questions. You can see flavors of it in other organizations. They're doing it use case based, and you essentially leveraging a pre-trained model that vendors are already training and using it against your pipeline. That to me would be more as a model ops as a service, which is kind of utilizing a model against your data points to get quick analytics. So yeah, I mean, to answer your question, that is something that is within the spectrum of what IBI and TIBCO are working on.
Yeah, and appreciate that. And I was kind of wondering if that question was going towards model ops or AI ops, and glad you kind of turned it in that realm, because that's something very interesting to a lot of people we talk to. So very cool. One last question, at least that I'm seeing from Devin, is do you have plans to consider education as a field for AI? And to be honest with you, I'm not quite sure if I understand exactly where that is being considered. If it's something that we're looking at for education. I think he's talking about the field of education, but do you have plans to consider education as a field for AI? This question.
I'll take that, and if somebody wants to add on, that's fine. So, like I mentioned earlier in response to one of the other questions, I think the single most frequently discussed KPI when it comes to education, and we've worked with multiple education K through 12 and college implementations. Single most frequently talked about KPI there has been churn, student retention and churn. So yes, again, and the key there, and the reason why it lends itself to a very good machine learning use case is that there are so many data elements that contribute to this churn, and so many data elements that you're potentially not looking at all the time. So that's where you have to understand correlations. You have to understand relationships between those data elements that in turn eventually contributes to student retention. So the answer is yes. I think we've already been working with several use cases in the field of education. But again, somebody talked about individualized student learning, educational testing systems, non-standardizing the standardized test process, things like that. So there's several more use cases that will evolve with time, but the churn has been the one thing that keeps coming back to us.
And same thing I've seen as well. So thanks for kind of deciphering that question for us, Dinesh. Okay, so and hopefully I haven't missed any, but that was the last question I had on the list. Again, I appreciate everybody. I appreciate the panelists for coming on. I know this was a great discussion. I think I enjoyed it, actually, just being able to moderate it. But I think for those around, getting to understand a little bit more about AI and ML and kind of our viewpoint on it and where the products are going and kind of how that's being handled. So that's extremely valuable information there. So I appreciate everybody who jumped on as a panelist, and for all the questions we got either before or during. Appreciate you guys for making this a rich conversation, and just appreciate everybody for jumping over. I don't know, I can't see who all's on, but I think we're 15 minutes over. So I will let everybody go, but appreciate everybody jumping on and look forward to the next one. Thanks, guys.